right, now that we've got that going, I'm going to hand things over to Nick. He's going to be the host of today. He's awesome, and y'all are in good hands. See y'all in a bit.
I don't get he's awesome very often. I'll take that. This is being recorded, right? Okay, let's go. Hey, everyone, how you doing? We're very excited that you're all here today. Drop in the chat where you're visiting from. I'd love to know where everyone's visiting from. Who's cold? Who's warm? Who's humid? That's what we were talking about here before you guys got on. Ohio. I'm sorry. I'm just kidding, Alexander. I'm just kidding. I will introduce now the group of people who are very kind to be here with us, the actual important people who will be dropping information. We've got Kira Flaherty, the SMB AE sales manager from Outreach, all the way in Ireland, correct?
Almost. I'm from Ireland. I am in London reporting live. Also chilly here.
Okay, you could be the UK correspondent. I'll take it. I'll take it.
Nice.
We've got Isabel Roach, also from Outreach. She is an AE, and she's joining us. Let me get Florida.
Yes, Tampa.
Okay, perfect. And of course, Dan Katz, the head of solution engineering at DemoStack, is all the way from the Baltimore, DC area. Because every time I suggest something, Dan, you tell me I'm wrong. So where are you?
Yeah, that's like the closest metropolitan area, but I'm from down in southern Maryland, as far south as you can go, in a place called St. Mary's County.
I like that. Okay, good stuff. Well, welcome to everyone here. We are talking about the connection between buyers and sellers that develops out of storytelling. So we'll be talking a lot about storytelling, and we'll also touch on discovery, because telling a great story really starts with great discovery. But before we do any of that, let's get Dan to actually tell us a story. So Dan, over to you, my friend.
All right. So I'm going to put a quote up on the screen here from an author that has made a large impression on me, named Joseph Campbell. So he lived in the 20th century, and he wrote a lot about comparative mythology and religion, and how we all as humans in our DNA share this need, this primordial need to tell and hear stories. And so I want you to contemplate this for a moment, and then take a moment to think about, what is the story that you want your buyers to remember? We all know in sales, people don't care about features. You can't win comparing features. It's all about stories. So what do you want them to remember? And if you'd like, at any time during this webinar, go ahead and share that in the chat. And towards the end, we'll share some of those together.
I love that. Dan, thanks very much for sharing that. And I think that is incredibly important, right? If we throw facts at you, if I threw out numbers right now, you're not going to remember it. But if I crafted a great story about whatever I was talking about, you're more likely to take that story, A, remember it, and then B, retell it as closely as I did. So, but we'll dig into that. So let's start off with you, Kira. Why, in your experience, is storytelling important in the sales process?
Absolutely. So my background at Outreach, been here a little over 2.5 years now, and started my journey on the new logo side, new business, and recently joined the customer facing side. So I think when it comes to telling a story, it's so important because it creates a relationship, and it also builds a trust as such. So when you were telling a story, it's important to have examples, perhaps even build that relatability. I think it's fair to say that no one likes to feel that they're the only person going through what they're going through. So listening to them and understanding where they're coming from, and sharing a similar situation, a similar story, really just makes you that more, I want to say, trustworthy, because you're building upon that relationship, and you are creating a foundation of say, moving forward. So that's why I think it's important.
Fantastic. And I want to dig into trust in a second with you, Isabel, but just a quick reminder for the audience, if you have questions, drop them in the Q&A. I would love to find out what's on your mind and what we can pull out of the panelists. Also, hi to Sharon, who mentioned she's in Scottsdale, Arizona. We're in Scottsdale. You should come into the studio, Sharon. We'll just do this live for you. But Isabel, back to trust. Why? And I know there's an obvious answer here, but I'd like, in your experience as an AE, why is trust important to build with your prospect?
I think trust is just really important to build with your prospect to make sure that they feel that you're a true advisor to them and that you really do understand their pain points, and you're not just throwing a bunch of features and functions at them and hoping that there's a connection, but you truly understand their challenges, where they're coming from, and then be able to connect your solution to that. I think that's definitely a big part of building trust.
How do you handle it though? You walk into this demo or this presentation or first discovery, Isabel, and you're not the trusted advisor out of the gate. You're the person who wants to sell them something. That's realistically what most prospects are going to walk in thinking. So how do you start that? How do you start by building that bridge?
Yeah, I think with the storytelling piece in mind, there's two different examples that I would like to pull from on my calls. It's either my personal examples that I can speak to, especially with outreach, selling a product that we use every day, and being at a company where maybe I haven't used outreach and understanding that impact and being able to tell my personal story, but also leveraging stories that I hear from my current customers. So every time I meet with a new current customer, we always chat about, why did you bring on outreach initially? What kind of impact did it make to your business? Like, how have things changed since? And then by getting all of those different stories, like, you're able to build a repertoire of a lot of your own customer stories that you can articulate on these different discovery calls and demos.
I love that. Dan, I know you and I have discussed this many times, but I want to hear why trust building is important from your point of view.
Yeah. So I think having that arsenal of stories that you can share is critical, but inviting the person you're talking to tell their story, in my mind, is maybe even more critical. So the whole selling thing, it's a human thing. I always say that the technology is just the supporting cast. We're really people trying to help each other in this process. And to do that effectively, we have to get really real. There has to be a little element of vulnerability in order to talk about fears and challenges and what really is happening. So to help us be in our prospect's shoes, inviting them to talk, being able to listen, and developing those kinds of skills can really set the stage and build that foundation of trust.
I love that. That makes a lot of sense. One thing that I think people get wrong all the time, and Dan and I talk to a lot of solutions engineers and then a lot of AEs who are handing off from solutions engineers every day. I think a lot of people, Dan, look at, we're still selling a product or a service versus a solution. How do you handle someone on your team, Dan, that has that mentality, and how do you get them to pivot?
So I'm going to be a little repetitive, I think, and say it comes down to listening, right? So your products are a part of a solution. A solution is always going to involve who's going to be implementing them. What kind of change is that going to make inside of an organization? What other types of products that may exist or teams in and outside of the organization are going to be affected here? And so to really build a solution, you need to put all of that into perspective. Now, there's a spectrum of, depending on the complexity of what you're selling. If it's a very transactional type of sale, maybe it's a very mature product that has, fully baked functionality versus something that takes some implementation. It's going to vary one way or the other. But you're going to have happier customers, faster implementations if you try to define what that solution is, not just about what they're buying the product, but how they're going to be successful with it and how it's going to fit into their ecosystem.
I love that. And I think one of the things that we run into with a lot of sellers is that they're thinking, they're talking in technical speak. It's very technical, the details, right? As opposed to like literally painting a picture. What is the experience the prospect's going to have if they adopt our product? What does it look like?
Exactly.
What does it smell like? What does it taste like? What does it feel like?
And how
And
does that compare to their experience today without the product that you're trying to sell? Usually there's some kind of reason that they're wanting to make that leap and cross that bridge with you. There's some kind of negative impact of their current situation. And how do you take them across that bridge, talk about and uncover what that positive outcome of the future is going to look like and build towards that?
I love that. And I think one of the key things when you are telling a story is you're trying to pull the prospect who's on the other side of the table into your story on stage next to you. And I think using vivid imagery is a great way to do that. Kiara, let's talk about using case studies, because I think that's a very easy North Star for people who are like, I don't know how I start to talk about storytelling. I don't want to, is it too fluffy? I think case studies is a great way to do that. How are some of the ways that you teach that to your team?
For sure. I think it's so important that you use case studies in the right way. Just sending them over in a follow-up email is absolutely not the right approach. You need to be able to align the right case study with who you are communicating with. So, of course, you need to be sure that you have done your due diligence, that you have earned the right to communicate your story to the right persona that you are speaking with. So, of course, with a case study, it's so important that you have the right facts, so that you have that credible source, that it's a real story. As Isabel mentioned, it's so important to gather these stories as you go along with your customer's experience, with your own experience, and make sure that if you are talking about a case study, if you are relaying an example, that you're picking up on signals, whether the story is going well and that they are relating to it, or maybe you need to pivot and you need to change how you are communicating a story, or even change that story as well. There's a interesting book called What Everybody Is Saying by Joe Navarro. And of course, a lot of meetings that we're having now on Zoom, you need to be able to recognize little signals, whether your prospect, your customer is enjoying your story, is listening, and is it's relating, or maybe it's not at all. So interestingly, a little signal, if a person is liking what they're hearing, if they're relating to it, your eyes tend to widen, your pupils dilate, you're soaking that in. So that's important to pick up. Another little tell is your nostrils tend to flare slightly, interestingly. However, on the other end, if a story isn't really landing, if the person is maybe getting bored, or it's not being related or relating to their situation, they tend to squint their eyes because they're blocking out what you're saying. And they maybe even look in a different direction to the screen itself. So it's so important to pick up on these little signals and be able to pivot and change the direction. Or why don't you just ask the question, hey, what are your thoughts so far in what we're talking about? Is on a scale of 1 to 10, is this something that you have interest in, or what are your thoughts? So yeah, it's there's no shame in changing direction or pivoting. It's okay to do that too.
It's imperative. But Isabel, I'm a busy AE. I'm clicking all around this demo. I'm not focused on reading body language. How do you manage that? What is the ties that bind so that you can understand what's happening and how your prospect is reacting, but still get through this 30-minute demo that you don't have time to do because you're so rushed?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think it really just comes down to like some of the prep work you do ahead of time. Because I think the more prep work you do ahead of an IM or a demo, the more like confident you feel, and like being in the moment on a call and being able to like identify all of those signals without feeling like, things are coming at you that you weren't expecting, and not being able to really focus on all of those signals and body language and facial expressions to see if the customer is actually engaged and listening. Just making sure you're like prepared as possible, I think, is key.
And I think it's another good excuse. If I'm a sales leader, I'm going back and having my AEs watch the tape, right? Their conversations on Gong or Chorus or whatever I'm using. So that's the opportunity to watch what the other person's doing. But Dan, what happens if I jump in and everyone's got their cameras off?
It makes it a lot more difficult. It definitely does.
Sure.
There are some tricks out there. So saying people's names is a great way to bring people back to attention, Nick. So
Yes,
even pre-COVID world, whenever I would sit in meetings, I would always, first note I would take is I would draw the table and I would make little names around the table so that I knew who was there and I could address people by name to pull them back into the conversation. So that's probably where I would start. I also think, there's multiple touch points in an opportunity, and it's okay to multi-thread, right? So maybe this big demo or this first presentation is like your toe under the door. Maybe there's someone you noticed who wasn't really engaged, or you have a champion inside of the account. You want to do a quick follow-up with, ask them how it went, ask them what the internal reaction was, and then set up some follow-ups based on that.
Love it. By the way, again, if you have any questions, drop them in the Q&A. A couple comments coming through, though. Justin pointed out that, case studies are a good way to put yourself in the customer's shoes. And then Michael followed up by saying it allows you to be empathetic to your prospect's problems. So obviously there's a theme here of you actually have to relate to your prospect. But we assume that we do that. We assume, but we don't. So Kiara, what happens when you have an AE who's not connecting in general with prospects? How do you coach around that?
You mentioned there some tools that are utilized in making sure that you can reflect on some calls or check it out and listen back to calls and give yourself feedback. Ask your manager, your leader for feedback. And on outreach, we have Kaya, which is able to give you insights on the percentage of the call that you are taking up. You want to make sure that it's not you taking up 80% of that conversation. Right. It's a two-way interaction. It's not just you taking over completely. There needs to be engagement from both sides, or to understand, like at the beginning of the call, Sharon made a great point there in the chat. You need to set that agenda. It's so crucial to set expectations, give that upfront contract, or even ask the question, hey, what do you want to get out of this call today? So that it really holds you both accountable to what is going to happen in that meeting. And I think when you are a new rep and you're still figuring out your style, it's so important to listen to your teammates' calls. Find out who on the team is the top performer, and don't copy, be yourself, but take little snippets and let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's just change and make it your own, so that bring that authenticity that is so critical when you are communicating, when you're telling stories, and of course makes you a lot more credible, right? Which is pretty important in storytelling. That you want to make sure that there's a believable nature, that you're sharing some facts as well as creating a good background, a good story as well.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And we're going to dig into personas in just a minute, but a couple things I wanted to touch on first. So, Sharon did mention setting an agenda. So Isabel, what are the opportunities? So let's say I'm in a situation where I've had a discovery call with one person, but now I've got 3 new stakeholders coming to the first demo. What are some of the things in the agenda that we want to make sure are covered? I'm assuming it's going to tie back to basically making sure we're actually talking about the right thing, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's super important to be multi-threaded on all of your demos, and when you're preparing for that big demo with all the stakeholders, I think it's important to bring other people into the conversation. So making sure that you're aligned with who they're bringing on to the call, so that there's different stories that can be told on both ends. So, for example, if we had a sales leader that was on the call, I would want to make sure that Kira was there to be able to align with that sales leader and ask questions, and make sure that there's a strong connection there. And then if there was like an operations persona, making sure we have an SC on there to make sure that, any technical questions are being ironed out. But I think back to the agenda piece, we have like a what we've heard slide as a part of our agenda, which typically just kind of goes over what we've heard on the introductory calls in the past with, the main point of contact we're talking to, and being able to ask each individual on the call, like, hey, does this align with, your challenges? Does this make sense? Because being multi-threaded is super important, but the challenges of the person that maybe you're initially talking to isn't going to be the challenges of every single person on the call.
Yeah.
Because so
Can I
many people have a
double-click on
vote,
this? Just
right, Dan?
yeah. I mean, I think the preparation and the agenda. I want to emphasize, and I apologize if you said this, Isabel, and I missed it, but it's not just us internally preparing, right? Like, so if you have that big demo coming up, you have your champion inside of the account, work with them to set the agenda, right? Like, ask them questions. What is this person going to expect? What are their concerns? How is this project going to impact them, both negatively and positively, potentially? So that you can really set up something with a little bit of inside information, right? And obviously you have to have that relationship with the champion in order to do that. But that's worked really well for me in a couple of opportunities recently, is really leveraging that person to help establish the agenda, help me understand who the people are, what's important to them, and that way we can target that together.
I love that, Dan. I think, sorry, by the way, if you do have questions, drop them in the Q&A. We'd love to answer them. And actually, we just got one from Allison. And I know that, we kind of covered on this, but she's asking for people new to sales, any case study best practices or resources you recommend. One thing that I'll always consider is, read the case studies that your marketing team has put together. They're probably on the blog, on your website. Have a look at them. And then the way that I think of it is, how would I explain this case study to my 12-year-old? Right? Because then what I'm doing is I'm really now, how do I take someone who doesn't speak the tech speak that we speak and translate it? So that's, I think, one thing to consider is, how would you explain it to your child? Right. And there is something too, there's a lot of, and I'm sure Outreach has a lot of great data on this. But there's something to, when you write your emails, what fourth grade or fifth grade level should you be writing at? Now, we want to speak at a different level, but I think we get so busy in the technical, gobbledygook that, we overemphasize a lot of things we don't need to. So, Dan, any other best practices that you want to bring up?
I think this might sound oversimplistic, but if there's something that doesn't make sense in the case study, if there's something that you don't understand, don't assume that your prospect is going to understand it. This kind of goes to what you were saying, Nick, but ask questions, talk to your marketing department, talk to the account team that works with that customer, and fill in the spaces that are in that case study, because it becomes even more powerful if you're not just repeating what's on the paper, but if you're using that as a launching pad for telling more stories about that customer, or about your solution.
That's great. Let's dig into personas a little bit, because I think having uniquely crafted stories, or at least North Stars for different personas, is so important. Kira, how do you look at that? I'm a new sales leader. I'm coming into Outreach. What am I looking at persona wise, and how do I make sure I'm actually hitting with the right stories?
Yeah, great point. So when it comes to personas, and the way I like to think of it is, so I used to play a lot of basketball back in my heyday, and you want to make sure that you are aligning the buying team with the selling team. So essentially, you are having the right positions, marking the right position. So Isabel touched on it really well earlier, but it's like you want to make sure that your point guard's marking your point guard. So your sales leader is aligned with your sales leader.
Yes.
Your post player is aligned with your post player. So having the marketing persona, speaking with the marketing persona, why not get everybody
Mm,
involved? There's no, it's not a secret. People like to feel that they are getting special attention. And if you are making sure that your head of marketing or your head of sales operations or your head of enablement is aligning with the buyer, that just gives more power to the deal. It's getting multi-threaded, it's getting deep rooted, and it's important because it is a tough market that we're selling into at the moment. People are very careful with what they're buying. It's a big decision. Their name is attached to that decision. Whether it goes well and they look incredibly good internally, or there's that risk that it mightn't go well and it could be financially quite tough for that individual, or their job could be on the line. So you want to make sure that you are asking the right questions, that you are involving everybody that needs to be involved. And we're finding a lot more lately, and Isabel, we talk about it all the time in our forecast and pipeline meetings. There is so many more people involved in the deal cycle than ever before. So hey, why not get everyone on our side involved too, and really align the right people with the right people?
I love that. And I just want to follow up on that real quick because no one has ever kind of positioned in that way. It's the first time I've heard that. And I really like that, Kiara. So are you talking about, if I have the CMO on the call, I'm bringing someone from marketing in on the call, or am I preparing my personas and developing these stories and these cadences by talking to marketing, and how should I talk it out? How much time do I need for my marketing team is what I'm asking you.
We are getting the CMO on the call. Why not? They are able to speak the language of a head of marketing better than anybody else. Similarly, with our CEO, the CEO, our CEO has got the same worries as our buyer CEO. So why not get them on a call together? What have we got to lose here by aligning everybody with the right people?
Okay, I love that. But now, Isabel, I'm the AE and I've got, the CFO, the CMO. I've got basically 4 different personas on their side. Am I literally bringing these 4 different personas in on my side? How are you handling that?
I would say it's definitely circumstantial. I know for us internally, one of our strategies that we have is setting up a separate call for our CRO and our CRO and their CRO to talk together on their own, as opposed to having a Zoom room of 8 or 10 people all aligned like one-to-one with their roles. So that's definitely one thing that I think our team is definitely like playing full out, and everybody's on board with that. The other strategy that I was going to mention too is one thing that we do internally from time to time is we will connect our current customers with prospects. So maybe they're in the same industry, they have a similar employee size, they're selling to similar personas, whatever it may be, and have our own customers, basically sell and tell their story to our prospects. And that's been super valuable as well.
Okay, that's really good too. Dan, how would you actually apply that in the field? Are you actually going to call your happy customer, making sure they're happy? You're going to call your happy customers. I need you on the phone with the CRO of outreach. Is that what you're doing, Dan?
Honestly, yeah. Sometimes that's what it looks like. Is you've developed this trusted relationship. You've helped this person accomplish their goals. You've helped them look good in front of their leaders, and there's a little bit of a give to get there, right? And if they're happy, if they're truly happy with your solution, your organization, your relationship, they're generally going to be more than willing to talk to a prospect. And I think setting the expectation that it can be the good, bad, and the ugly. Like, we're not just looking for fluff here, but this is software. This is real. Like, be honest about the challenges too. Let's be transparent, so that expectations are clear on both sides.
I like that, Dan. That's a really good point. Kiera, I want to ask you something about having different. So now I've got these different personas in the room. Okay. So now I've got 4 different personas. I'm ready. I'm prepped. But should I be guiding that conversation to the key decision maker, or do I still need to be kind of, shifting around where I go à la minute?
I think there's probably no, it depends. It really, really depends. There's no one size fits all here. I wish it was that simple. I think if you ask the question around, hey, just so we're aligned here, can I ask you a couple more details about your internal buying process? Like, what do we need to focus on here to get a deal done? What do we need to do to make sure that we're aligning the right resources, and to make sure we're ticking all the boxes internally from your side? Because we need to remember, we are selling all day, every day. The people that are buying, they're not. They are trying to figure it out, trying to navigate through all the noise. So we need to make that journey as easy for them as possible. So once we get a bit more of an understanding as to what their internal buying process looks like, it's so important to follow that process, or to make some suggestions as to what we usually see happen, so that you're not leading them, that you're not telling them
Right.
what to do.
You're pulling.
You're helping them. You're guiding them along that buyer journey, which is important. So I probably didn't answer your question as
No,
such.
but that was
like,
great. No, I love that. But Isabel, how do you know that you're hitting that? How do you ask, without saying which buying process? How do you say which buying process?
It's a good question. I think it's just all about like testing your champion and seeing, if you are talking to the right people and making sure you are bringing the right people into the room and onto the demos. But that's definitely a tough question to ask sometimes. But I think when you're at like the later stages of the sales process and you are starting to talk about commercials, it gets a bit easier to come straight out and just ask the question when you know that you're the preferred vendor, and what numbers they might want to move forward with and that
Right.
sort of thing. But you have to build trust to be able to ask a question like that, which comes in the later stages of the process.
I love that. And we're going to talk about building a champion in a couple minutes, but Dan, I kind of want to pivot to that. Actually, Mary's got a great question, Dan, that I'm going to lob over to you. How do you involve storytelling in each step of the process? So let me frame that out for you, Dan. Can I use storytelling in discovery?
100%. 100%. So when we're doing discovery, we're asking a lot of open-ended questions. What are you trying to accomplish here? What's not working with the way that you're doing this today? And then I could provide an example and reflect that back. Okay, Nick, so what you're telling me is that you rely on a shared demo environment. And so I could imagine that you've probably had experiences where you're giving a demo for a prospect and suddenly something changes in the environment and it totally screws you up, takes you off your path because someone else was doing a demo at the same time and that wasn't scheduled properly. Has that ever happened to you?
Ooh, I like that, Dan. I like that. Okay, give me another one.
Right. Okay. So I took my teenage daughter and her friend to what was it, Bed Bath Body Works, whatever, to go buy smelly things the other day. And if you ever want to learn pre-sales, like Home Shopping Network, QVC, or walk into like one of these stores that sell smelly stuff. It's great pre-sales training. So, walk in, looking at candles, which I'm burning one right here in my office right now, and I'm saying, okay, well, I like candles, but I want to feel like it's relaxing and not overpowering. And so the young lady who was talking to me said, "Oh, so tell me an example of when you felt that way. Where's somewhere you've been where you've had those smells?" And I said, "Well, like a really nice hotel, like a spa or something like that. You walk into like a hotel spa and it's kind of clean smelling and invigorating." And she's like, "Oh, okay. So, let's take a look at these things." So she's inviting me to tell stories. She's drawing that out of me. Anyway, it's all human stuff.
Kira, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I have something to add there on the back of that great story. So we asked this question, and it allows the customer or the prospect to open up. And it's super simple, but it's so effective. And essentially, you ask them, so we've come along this process now, but I have a question for you around your previous experience with, say, vendors, suppliers. Could you tell me what you think is a really strong quality in a vendor, or maybe something that is something that you're totally trying to avoid? What is something that is not an experience you want to go through again? Maybe give me a little bit of an example so we can either avoid that and not do that, absolutely stick to the opposite. Or if you've got an example of a vendor that you're super impressed with, then what looks like a good partnership? And they will be able to tell you a story, whether it's a good example, something that went really well, the onboarding was smooth, it was a really pleasant experience, or the exact opposite, where they're like, well, this happened and that was terrible, and we really didn't like the way they did this. And you take every single note and you stick to what they liked and you avoid what they don't like. Um, so we find that works really, really well, letting them open up and tell their story, their experience.
Very effective. I like that too. I'm here learning so much today. This is fantastic. If you have questions, drop them in the chat. Don't be shy. Allison, you had a question that wasn't really pertinent, but I dropped you a link. Connect with me and I'll make sure that I answer that for you offline. Okay, let's talk a little bit. Does anyone in the audience, anyone have any particular discovery questions? Or I'm going to move on to building a champion, which is also really key. I'll give you a 5, 4, 3, 2. Okay, we can come back to it. I won't put you on the clock. Isabel, as an AE, why is it so important? Just high level, why is it important to build a champion?
Yeah, it's important to build a champion for a few different reasons. But I think the main reason you want to find a champion and build them up in any sales cycle that you're in is because they're going to be selling on your behalf when you're not in the room. And they have influence on a lot of decision makers at the organization to really make an impact. Just a few reasons off the top of my head.
I love that. Kira, how do you know, though, if you actually have a champion? How do you know you think you have a champion? How do you verify?
You have to test them. You need to be able to test your champion. And a simple way of doing that is asking them the difficult questions. If they have the buying power, they'll be able to tell you and give you an honest answer, and that assures you they are the champion. And if they can't tell you the answer, then they're not your champion. We internally call it like a champion versus a coach. So a coach is someone, maybe they've got good intention, but maybe they're new, so they're not aware of the internal buying process.
Right.
So they're a coach. If they're a champion, they'll tell you exactly who you need to speak to, what you need to say, and they will talk about you when you're not in the room and sell for you when you're not there.
I just
So
saw what Sam posted in the chat. They want you to win. And that is it right there. Is there's something in it for
100%.
them, right? There's something in it for them where this is gonna make their lives better if you win.
They need tool. They need the
Absolutely.
tool. Actually, Mary asked a great question. Define a champion. I should have done that. Dan, I'll let you do that.
So I actually think, Sam, you did it for us. It's somebody inside the organization that you can partner with that really is your advocate inside the organization and wants you to win. They can get you access to information. They can get you access to people. They can sell on your behalf, like Kiara was saying. They can help you navigate the organization and the process, but they may not be the decision maker, or they may not even be, next to the decision maker. They may be 2 or 3 steps removed. And so that's a challenge.
And I think, that's why it's so important to tell these stories and build trust, all the things we've been talking about, because at the end of the day, just my opinion, but we're all selling a widget and there's 10 other companies selling that widget. But if you build a really strong champion quickly, because a lot of products are similar, not the same, similar. If you build a champion really quickly, you can get launched into the top 3, right? So now you've eliminated 7 of the 10 other products that are out there because you've built such a strong champion. I mean, do you agree? You push back on that. Anyone want to push back on that?
So the only comment I'd make, Nick, is contrasting that to like an RFP process, right?
Okay.
Especially a blind RFP process where you're basically competing on paper and there's a list of checkbox features that they're trying to check your organization against all the others. You have very little power there because you don't have that relationship. You might get your toe under the door, but that's really the only purpose for participating in a process like that, is just to get to the next step where you can actually start to connect with someone.
It's a really good point, but we are being scorecarded. I mean, and that's why, again, if you build a really good champion, you might, do they definitely have it or do they kind of have it? You might get fudged between those lines, which is a nice place to be in this situation. Savannah really did a great description here. A champion is someone inside the organization that you're trying to sell to, that is your advocate and is selling on your behalf, but may not be the decision maker. And that's why telling stories is so important, because it's what Dan opened up with. If I give you some facts and data and features, you're not going to remember that. But if I tell a great story, right? Because now every time I see Kiara, I'm going to think about her playing basketball, right? Because she opened up with, but she did, right? That was a really good point. So I think that's
you
really
get to
important.
think about me with my fragrances too, Nick.
I'm trying to already push that out of my head, Dan. I had a lot of jokes that I didn't go with there because we're having a good time. But yes, I am. Guess what you're getting for Christmas, Dan?
Oh yes, white tea and sage, Nick. White tea and sage.
There's a Bed Bath and Beyond right downstairs here at the Demo Stack Studios. Oh, that's funny. Okay, we're having a good time here. Okay, I got to get back on track. I'm getting distracted because y'all are making me laugh. Kiara, how do we build champions, or why, in your words, explain why building a champion is key to multi-threading a deal? And define multi-threading first.
Sure. So multi-threading is essentially getting deep-rooted. So if you are single-threaded, if you are only dealing with one person, that deal is something that I am not letting Isabel put into her commit on our forecast call. I want to see at least 3 people, ideally from different departments or of different personas, so that I feel that we are speaking to multiple different people. We're ideally solving more problems. So making ourselves more valuable, right? We want to make sure that we are ideally reaching out to our sales leader. I'm reaching out to that sales leader, talking that sales leader language. Then we've got maybe Isabel speaking with account executives, BDRs, SDRs, talking to them about using the platform on a daily basis. And then maybe we've got sales enablement person, and we are talking to them and ensuring that we're aligning on their current challenges. We're talking about problems we have solved through communication and storytelling,
right?
But making sure that we are addressing everybody who is involved, everybody who's a stakeholder. Because I know there's such a big emphasis on making sure that you're speaking with the decision maker and making sure that you are aligning with the big key challenges at a high level. However, there is such an importance of getting below the line and speaking with those who are going to be using the platform as well, because I've seen it where the person, the decision maker, oh yeah, we're buying, this is it, and then suddenly turn around and say, oh, we actually need to take a step back because there's misalignment internally, and we need to make sure that we're making a correct decision for the entire business. So
Okay,
that's the importance.
Okay, that's great though. I love that you set me up for this. We're misaligned. Dan, how do I correct the misalignment?
It's a good question. So I think you need to figure out how to keep the conversation going without actually talking in real time. And so one of the ways that you can do that is through good leave behinds, right? So let's say you're doing a demo, maybe you're sending some case studies around, but using technology like DemoStack, we could actually create interactive assets that your champion can circulate around the different members of the buying team to amplify your message without you necessarily driving that. And so if the message you're trying to send is, here are the 3 problems that our solution solves, let me prove it to you through these case studies and this demonstration of our product, and that can be the same message that's circulated internally, people can get their hands on it, have the experience of using the product, that can go a long way to both getting everybody on the same page, but also getting feedback quickly back to you, because that's another area where things break down and people get misaligned, is you're playing telephone, right? You're sort of he said, she said. But if people can provide direct feedback through a demo asset, that helps a lot too.
So you teed me up again. You guys are doing great here. They're making my life easy, because we're going to wrap up with leave behind. So this is your last chance. If you do have questions, drop them in the Q&A or even drop them in the chat. It's not that busy right now. Otherwise, we are going to pivot to leave behinds, because I think leave behinds are the great underrated way to tell a story. Dan, I know you already touched on that. I'll come back to you. But Kira, what are some of the tactics that you want to have your sellers looking at when it comes to leave behinds? Well, sorry, Kira, can you tell us what a leave behind is?
I was actually going to ask you that question. What is a leave behind?
Okay. Dan, what's a leave behind?
It can be a lot of different things. I'm seeing a great note from Sam again. Sam, you're getting an A+ here. Email with links to case studies or links to videos. Basically, if I had to broadly define a leave behind, it's something that somebody could view asynchronously, not with you on the phone at the same time, that will help continue to do the selling for you, to advocate for you, to educate and inform, and show them, prove that your solution is going to be the best one for the problem.
Okay, sorry, I'm giving Chris at +1 here because that was funny. Your leave behind's a candle, Chris. Or sorry, Dan. But leave behinds are so important. And I'm just going to, and I want to hear, ladies, from you about your strategies with leave behinds. One of the things that I always used to do with the leave behind is I would also send like a quick 15, 30-second video. So I just a quick Loom or on LinkedIn, and hey, just want to recap these things, and I'm leaving this leave behind because of ABC. Very powerful. Also, if you have a champion, maybe there's just one person on that call. I once had, actually was a proposal recap that I did. And because I put it on Loom, I could see how many individual people watched it.
Yeah,
there was
love that.
40 people, individual users inside that company that watched my 45-second proposal recap. Did I get the contract? Yeah, I did. Okay, Isabel, what's your strategy for leave behinds?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have something called success plans here internally, which is essentially a mutual action plan. It's really collaborative between you and your customer. So it's a big push for us this quarter to create more success plans because they just continue to drive the deals forward and accelerate them at a much quicker pace. So within those success plans, making sure you're attaching the recording of the meeting that you were just on, if they want to double click on anything or listen to anything back, making sure that you're attaching case studies that are relevant to them, making sure maybe if you want to create another quick video of a feature or function that you're adding that in there, and that they're also able to leave you some information as well. If they want to add something to the sales process that they have in their buyer process, they can do that, and just make sure that you're both working together to check off all the boxes in the sales process, just to continue to get those next steps so you can get the deal signed.
I love that. Kiara, any final thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's such a interesting signal if you can see that your prospect or your customer is viewing the things that you're sharing, the leave behinds that you're sharing. Because if they're not, that's a signal that there's more work that needs to be done, that you're not mutually invested. Or if they are checking and you can see multiple people are looking at it, that's a great sign. So another point on that, it's all well and good giving all of this to the customer, to the prospect, these leave behinds, adding that extra bit of value. However, I think it's important to have gives and gets. So make sure that you're getting something as well, as leaving all this value and all this additional work. You want to say, hey, shared all this with you now. Any more insight or anybody you can introduce me to internally that you think this would be helpful to, or anybody else we can talk to see how they're using their current solution. So gives and gets as well as leave behinds. Make sure that you're getting something as well is important.
All right, I'm going to recap on one thing, but to give to get, in the spirit of that, Kiara, if you found this valuable and you want some more great content on storytelling and discovery, basically everything in your demo process, right there, just dropped in the link for the Demo Stack LinkedIn page. All I do is make content on these subjects. And let me tell you, I'm going to go back and rewatch this tape because there's so much gold here from Kiara and Isabel and Dan. Last thing, ladies and gentlemen, Dan did open with, what story do you want people to remember? So go ahead and drop that in the comments. And as you're doing that, I'm just going to ask, Dan, I learned a ton today. What did you learn today, Dan?
Oh my God, I learned a ton too. I learned that Kiara plays basketball. It was awesome to know that. But just, gosh, where to start? So like the mutual action plans, that we were talking about with outreach, we've just started to use those at Demo Stack, and they're awesome. So I'm inspired to talk to you guys more about best practices there. I learned, Kiara, talking about the body language and the signals that you're getting there, and then Isabel, some of your ideas around identifying the personas and inviting people into the room. I just want to hang out with you guys and do this again. This was good.
I know, this was great. Isabel, what did you learn today?
I learned some different ideas for leave behinds, and I think the importance of giving and getting is something we don't talk enough about. So making sure I'm implementing that in my own sales process. So I'm giving them as much as they're giving to me. And this was great. Thank you for including me on the webinar today.
Oh, it's all Savannah. I didn't put this together. Kiara, what about you? What did you learn today?
Leave behinds. Very important. I knew what they were, but I just wanted to double check just in case I wasn't picking it up. And also, Nick, you mentioned there sending a little video. Like, it's so simple. It's so quick. And isn't it like a picture or a video is so much more impactful than a big long email that no one really reads? So
it's shareable, it's bites. Don't get me started. In Savannah, by the way, there's a bunch of comments on that. So if we need to have a sales hacker webinar on video, I'm here for it. I'll promise to bring Will Aiken with me. Just throwing that out there. Well, this was great. Savannah, did you learn anything?
I did. I learned that Dan is a man of fragrance. Great. Lots of learnings, and I'm looking forward to taking a look at the recording again and chopping this up into bits and pieces for social as well. So this is going to be great.
Fantastic. Well, appreciate all y'all joining. A few of you are asking about video right now. If you ping me, message me on LinkedIn, I'll reach out to you and I'll give you some tips on using video, because anything for Sales Hacker. Oh, you know what I forgot to do? Hold on. Wait. Don't go yet. Oh, okay. Got my Sales Hacker hat. I should have worn
There we
that.
go. There we go.
Darn it. All right. Appreciate everyone joining us today. Kiara, Isabel, Dan, thank you so much. Savannah, thank you for putting this together. Follow us on Demo Stack. Anything else, Savannah?
No, I just wanted to mention we've got a kickoff event in January with Sales Hacker. We're going to have Manny Medina come in, do an Ask Me Anything session with us. So if you've got questions for him, want to interact with him, we'll also be announcing our Best of 2022, some awards for our contributors at Sales Hacker. So make sure you show up. I'll drop the link in the chat. But other than that, y'all have a great rest of your week, and we will see you sometime later.